Thank you. Just before we start, for the benefit of members of the public, we will be moving shortly to cross-examination by other parties other than counsel assisting the Commission. If you want information about the process of cross-examination, you can have a look at practice direction number 4 from paragraph 25 on. It's not an unfettered right and restricted right to cross-examine. It is subject to limitations. Now, and also I want to make it clear that Ms Cale has not concluded her questioning of Mr Ord, but although it's not ideal, we thought the proper process was to finish this aspect of the cross-examination so that Mr Ord would be free to have unfettered access to his legal advisors, and that's particularly so, as he said yesterday, that he does still bear a responsibility on behalf of the department for matters relating to this Royal Commission. So before I call on Mr Dharmananda, there is, I think, one issue, Ms Cale, that you want to raise with Mr Ord before we go on. So Mr Ord, would you come forward, and if I could just remind you that your oath continues. Yes, Ms Cale.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr Ord, yesterday you gave some evidence about in response to questions that I asked you relating to the agreement that you reached in February of this year with Mr Connolly for him to step aside from the role of Chief Casino Officer. You recall that evidence?
Yes.
Now, before then, at any time between you commencing in your role as Director General in 2017, but before February 21, did Mr Connolly ever inform you that he had been friends with a Perth casino employee, a Mr Hume or Holm, since the 1990s?
I don't particularly recall any names. I didn't know who the staff of Crown were below, fairly high level officers that I came in contact with in the Gaming Wagering Commission. Whether he ever mentioned that he knew Mr Holmes specifically, I don't recall.
Or a Mr Murray?
No, again, I didn't know of Claude until he appeared in that particular meeting.
Or a Mr Nichols?
No, again, I wasn't familiar with Mr Nichols.
Did Mr Connolly ever inform you in a general way that he was friends with some people who worked for Perth Casino?
Yes, I was aware that Mr Connolly had worked in this role for a long time. He discussed that he had a good working relationship with a range of staff, that they were, as he considered friends, because he had known some staff who had worked in the department before and had subsequently gone to work for Crown. So he never withheld, in my sense, anything that would give me belief that he was trying to hide any of those kind of relationships. But he also was, a great stickler for the boundary around his particular role. On a number of occasions, I asked him to represent me at functions that I couldn't attend in my broader departmental responsibility, as he was my deputy. And I often attended functions either on behalf of the Minister or, stakeholder functions. And he always declined on the basis that he didn't want any perception that it would conflict with his role as a regulator. So he was constantly reminding me, if you like, that he had to protect his role as a regulator. So got a high degree of confidence in him.
What kind of functions are you referring to?
Type of functions I would go to might be stakeholder events like an awards night for sports, or awards night for the tourism industry, few things like that.
And it was that sort of function that Mr. Connolly told you he didn't think was appropriate for him to attend?
Yes, in his role, yes.
All right. Now, just to finish off, do you have a recollection of about how many times Mr. Connolly explained to you or led you to understand that he had friendships with people employed by Perth Casino?
It wasn't an ongoing conversation. I think it came up really just in discussion that we might have had when we were having one of our briefing meetings about the fact that he was, talking about his weekend. I mean, our jobs were very stressful, so you often just say, how did you go on the weekend or whatever? And he would mention that he had taken up skydiving. That was the major thing, and I thought that it was a high-risk occupation given the stress he was under. So we'd have a bit of banter about the fact that he was going off to do skydiving, and he said, "Oh, I've got skydiving. I enjoy going out fishing and so on." There wasn't any particular reference back to anyone that he did it with, but I was aware that that was his release outside of work, was going fishing and skydiving, and that was the nature of the conversation.
And did you infer that because of his friendship with Perth Casino people, that those activities could have been undertaken with people such as them?
It didn't occur to me that he was specifically going fishing with people from them, but as I said, as I didn't know the names, I mean, there's 5,000 employees of Crown, he might have said, I've gone out with, Claude or something, and I wouldn't have related that back to, that's someone from Crown, because he wouldn't necessarily have said. He might have assumed I knew who they were, he might not have, but it wasn't the nature of the relationship. And it wasn't on the basis I need to declare these things, because he had declared them to the previous Director General, and I think he assumed that those things were known in the department.
What do you mean he had declared them to the previous Director General?
Well, I understand that he made that the previous Director General was aware that Mr. Connolly knew people who had worked in the department now working for Crown, and that had been a known matter inside that regulatory division, and that Mr. Connolly had believed that he had declared it at that time and it was known.
Declared what, Mr. Ord?
Well, that he had that he knew these people and that he had a friendship with these people, that it was known, yes.
And how do you know these things that you've just told me about?
Well, because when I had matters brought to me of saying that there could be a concern about the relationship, and at the same time, Mr. Connolly made his formal declaration at the Gaming Wagering Commission when Mr. Murray attended for the first time.
When was that?
I think it was late-ish last year. I'd have to recall the date. I think it was the October meeting last year.
Yes. All right.
So I'd undertaken some prima facie investigation to see whether there was any matter there that should be concerned. The first thing I did was ring Mr. Sargent and say, are we aware of this relationship? Because Mr. Connolly had told me that he had previously declared that, and Mr. Sargent confirmed that he did know, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Wood.
Thank you, Ms. Carl.
So can I just clarify that? So was it in your conversations with Mr. Connolly and Mr. Sargent that you found out about the specific friendships? Or had Mr. Connolly told you about them previously?
Well, in terms of my understanding, that Mr. Connolly was informing me that he had a friendship with a person at Crown that was going to intersect with the Gaming and Wagering Commission. The first time I became aware of that was at the meeting when Mr Murray, then Crown approached the agency and said Mr Murray would be attending. So Mr Murray, as I understand it, was a lawyer for Crown, but wasn't doing work specifically related to matters that had come before me, because Mr Preston had been the legal officer that attended Gaming Wagering Commission meetings. Mr Connolly said at that meeting Mr Murray was coming in and that they were friends, that they, in their private life had gone fishing together.
So that was the
they
meeting.
weren't close friends, but they had that friendship, and he wanted the Gaming Commission to be aware of that and asked whether he should exit the meeting or not participate in that particular briefing, and we chose the latter.
And was that the meeting you referred to in late 2019?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
20, he said, didn't he?
Oh, sorry,
2020.
2020,
Yeah, sorry,
yes.
my
So prior to that, if Mr Connolly had informed me that he, or had discussed people that he knew, it wasn't in the context that I need to inform you of this because of matters related to the Gaming Commission. It may have been in casual conversation, but I never found him ever evasive about his private life in that sense. He was very clear that he just worked, and then he did a few things, fishing and going to skydiving.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Ord. Mr Dharmananda.
Commissioners, Mr Evans will commence first this morning.
Thank you, Commissioners. Mr Ord, in your evidence yesterday, you confirmed that in relation to the funding of the GWC, in substance, the funds which are available and which appear in its budget comprise only those funds which it receives from licence fees in relation to gaming activities. Is that correct?
And a small amount of supplementation, yes.
When you refer to the small amount of supplementation, that's departmental resources which are made available.
Yes, and just those funds related to problem gaming as part of the appropriation, yes.
Yes. But substantially, it's the funds which are available as a result of licence fees.
Yes.
And you confirmed also that those funds, in substance, after payment of the fees of the members, are paid to the department to effectively satisfy the department's operating costs in relation to the gaming function.
Yes.
Now, in discussing how that transfer of funds to the department was calculated, you referred in your evidence to the fact the casino is making a contribution of the $4 million.
There's also contributions from Racing and Wagering WA to cover elements of GWC activity.
I just want to clarify that to you. It's page 74 of the transcript at 20. The correct position, I think, was set out in the response which was authored by your department to the notice of 15 April 2021. That's the notice of 1st of April 2021, question 1.4. That's document QNE.0001.001.0024. And the actual amount in 2019-2020, which came from the fee paid by the casino for its licensing activities, I think was $2,980,812. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe so.
It's a table on the following page. So that's shown. Thank you. That shows the licence fee growing from $2.4 million 10 years ago to $2.98 million in 2019-2020. Is that correct?
Yes.
And just to understand how that comes about, you mentioned, and it's to be fair, it was in passing mention, that revenue grows with casino activity. That's actually not quite correct, is it?
Well, we apply a licence fee increase, yes. That,
Yes, to understand the notion of applying a licence fee increase, in this case, the casino licence fee is what's defined as the annual specified amount in the Burswood Island Casino Agreement, isn't it?
That's true, yes.
And the annual specified amount, which is defined in clause 23(1)(b) of the Casino State Agreement, started at $400,000 per annum back in 1984 when the agreement was struck, 1985 when the agreement was struck. It was reset in 1990 to $1.4 million, and it has escalated at CPI ever since.
That's correct. We applied that adjustment to it based on
So
Treasury approval.
It's simply a CPI inflated figure which was set in the state agreement.
Yes, that's true.
And there's no element of discretion in setting the fee. There's no element other than calculation.
We do make submission to Treasury related to the recovery of costs, and that's normally identified as to what those CPI increases are intended to be.
But the fact is that all the Commission is entitled to, that is all the GWC is entitled to, as a result of the state agreement, is a fee which was set 21 years ago, escalated at CPI.
Agreed.
Thank you. If I can take you to paragraph 31 of your evidence briefly. Council assisting refer you to a number of elements of the activities undertaken by the department in support of GWC, and one of those was policy development. And you recall being asked about policy development?
Yes.
And you referred in your evidence to the development of various instruments and policies of the casino required to support GWC.
Yes.
That was at page 56 of the transcript. Now, that's not the only policy development which GWC is involved in, is it?
No, there's policies obviously related to community gaming, racing.
And in fact, in recent, there's been a significant workload for the GWC, hasn't it?
Yes.
So, for example, the GWC in recent times, in fact very recently, was involved in the development of a new regulatory framework to support the privatisation of the totaliser and betting agency.
Yes.
The adoption of a new national consumer law framework for gambling.
Yes.
Consideration of the impact of unregulated online gambling activities.
Yes.
And the routine policy development in relation to community gaming generally.
Yes, I think that in my broader response I indicated where the areas of priority were before the Commission, and it did include significant focus in those areas.
Those were all significant pieces of policy work, were they not?
Yes.
Both for the Commission and for the resources within your department.
Yes.
Now, if I was going to take you from there to the question of support provided by the department to GWC in relation to regulatory issues, and this is paragraph 122 of your statement and page 70 of your evidence. And Council Assisting put to you some questions in relation to answers which GWC had provided in its the answer to the notice to produce. And you indicated that you thought the support provided to GWC by your department had been adequate to address regulatory issues other than the particular risks identified by the Bergen report.
Yes, I did.
Now, is it the case that within the, as you understand it, within the structure of the casino legislation, the Chief Casino Officer occupies a central place in relation to the regulation of casino gaming?
Indeed, yes.
So the Chief Casino Officer has a number of express functions under the Casino Control Act. You're familiar with those?
Yes.
So, for example, the release of information under Section 13, power to grant exemptions to the casino licensee from compliance with Section 25. Those are things that the Casino Control Officer is responsible for.
Yes.
Now, I think this is clear from your evidence yesterday, but I just want to make sure it is absolutely clear to the Commission. Historically, it is the case that the position of Casino Control Officer has always been held by a senior officer within the department concerned with racing and gaming.
Yes.
And originally that was within the Office of Racing, Gaming and Liquor. And more recently, since the machinery of government changes which you referred to, that has been attached to the office of the Deputy Director General.
Yes.
And it's still the case that the position of Chief Casino Officer is in fact attached to the job description form.
Yes.
For the Deputy Director General. And Commissioners, if you wish to look at the relevant job description form, it's document DLG.0001.0002.0008 at page 3. Now, and just to understand the terminology here, because there is a little bit of public sector structural understanding which is important. Within the Public Sector Management Act, there is a notion of an employing authority. You referred to that concept yesterday. And there are two key accountability positions in government in relation to any organisation. One is the employing authority for employees, and one is the accountable authority for financial matters.
Yes, indeed.
Commissioner Murphy will be well familiar with the latter. The notion of an employing authority, there's only ever one employing authority for an organisation, is that right?
Indeed, yes.
And that is always the senior officer within the relevant organisation, in your case, the Director General of the department.
Yes.
And it is effectively all employees of that organisation are employed by that employing authority.
Yes, as public servants under the Public Sector Management Act.
That's correct. So when one talks of an appointment under the Public Sector Management Act, one in fact talks about an appointment under an employment agreement with an employing authority.
Yes.
And it is that employing authority which is responsible for supervising the performance of the employee
Yes.
and all matters of discipline in relation to them.
Yes.
Now, you're familiar with the notion that under the Casino Control Act, Section 9 explicitly makes provision for the appointment of a casino control officer under Part 3 of the Public Sector Management Act.
Yes.
And it is the case, isn't it, that the only relevant employing authority for that purpose is now you as the Director General of the department.
Under the Public Sector Management Act, yes.
That's right. So it is very clear that whoever is occupying from time to time the position of the Casino Control Officer is an employee of you as the employing authority
Yes.
under the PSMA. Thank you. Now, one of the things you said yesterday was that the Casino Control Officer was appointed by the GWC. What I want to put to you is that's not quite right, is it, Mr. Ord? Because as the JDF for Mr. Connolly, which I just took the Commission to, makes clear, the position of CCO is an embedded incident of the role of Deputy Director General. So,
Yes, though we under the statutes of the Gaming Wagering Commission and the Casino Control Act, we bring forward that appointment to the Gaming and Wagering Commission for their approval of that appointment. My assumption, and I understand what you're saying around the approving to employ, but my view of that would be that the Gaming Wagering Commission should have an opinion on that the person I'm putting forward is appropriately qualified.
yes, and that is important because what in fact, to make the distinction quite clear, what the GWC actually does, which is important, is that the GWC confers a delegation upon the Chief Casino Officer
And they do, yes.
for a number of their functions. And it is actually that which is the relevant act of the GWC in relation to a CCO, which is the GWC's action under its legislation. Is that correct?
I'm not challenging your interpretation. I would agree that's
And
the
perhaps I
case.
can just take the Commission to demonstrate the point to the Resolution 3 of 2021 in the minutes of the meeting of the GWC for 16 February 2021 in relation to Mr Beecroft's appointment. GWC .0002.0016.0349.
Mr Evans, I would be assisted by some clarification as to why the GWC cannot be an employing authority. You put that to the witness, and I just don't know whether that was a correct statement of law.
That may need to be a matter of submission. I don't think it's a matter I can put to
All
Mr
right,
Ord
well,
in that
you
regard.
shouldn't just be misleading the witness, if that's all.
I
If
hope
there's
I'm
some basis for, if there's a legal basis for the proposition, then I'm happy with it, but
Right.
that's all. I'll leave it to you, Mr Evans.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'll take that on board, but as I say, I'm putting to Mr Ord my interpretation of the relevant legislation is and what I will put in submissions in due course in relation to the position which prevails in relation to the appointment
It's just
of
that you put it to him as a proposition. that that was the fact. And my understanding was you shouldn't put propositions unless they are correct. There is a basis.
Well, I take it the basis is it lies in section, I think it's section 19 of the, that's section 9 of the Casino Control Act.
You can ask him whether that's the case, whether that's his understanding, but you put it more firmly than that, that was all. You put it as a proposition. That was the style, perhaps.
Perhaps it is a matter of style, Commissioner, but so that is the submission which we've been putting, that it is actually, it is structurally within the framework of the Gaming and Wagering Commission legislation and the Casino Control Act, the relevant public sector body which provides support to the Gaming and Wagering Commission, which is the appointing authority. And if I can take you to Section 9 of the Casino Control Act for that purpose, there shall be appointed under and subject to Part 3 of the Public Sector Management Act a Chief Casino Officer and such government inspectors. And that sits in a context where it is explicitly contemplated that that the Commission shall otherwise employ only temporary and casual employees, other than employees which are provided by arrangements which are made under the Gaming and Wagering Commission Act for the supply of services, including employees by other government departments. So, as we would put it, structurally, the Commission has been constituted so as to be wholly dependent upon effectively a host organisation which employs other than for temporary and casual employees. That's the proposition which we'll put in submission.
Thank you, Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Commissioner. I was taking you to the resolution at GWC.0002.0016.0349. Apparently those can't be called up. Perhaps I can simply leave the reference in the transcript, and the Commission can see.
What was the last number?
0.0349.
349.
Yes.
Thank you.
And it's a resolution which, in its terms, just lost my screen. Resolve 3/2021 to support the appointment of Mr. Mark Beecroft as Chief Casino Officer and to delegate effectively to Mr. Beecroft certain functions under the Casino Control Act. It is not to appoint him, but to support his appointment. Thank you, Mr. Wood. Just to understand one more thing about Mr. Connolly. In the context of his role when he became Chief Casino Officer, when that position had previously been held by a directorate level officer in the Office of Racing, Gaming, Liquor, the responsibilities of the Chief Casino Officer principally focused upon the casino, but included other, what I might call liquor and gaming regulatory functions. Is that right?
That's my understanding, yes.
When that was translated into the new departmental structure, was I right in hearing you say yesterday that Mr. Connolly, in that role, picked up policy responsibility, not only for the areas which had previously consumed that role, but also sports, including combat sports?
Yes, well, for the regulatory functions of the new department, I appointed him, well, in his role now, to oversight our regulation more generally. So there was combat sports regulation in sports, and then there was the Local Government Act and subsidiary legislation.
Yes. So all of the policy development issues in relation to the whole of local government,
Yes,
they now fell within his purview.
yes,
Did that have the effect of greatly increasing his workload?
yes.
And is it a necessary corollary of that he had less time available to spend on casino activities?
I would imagine that he needed to delegate more work that he may have personally have taken on previously in order to take on the oversight of matters relating to those other regulatory areas that became under our purview, in the same way that I was previously only Director General for Arts and then became Director General for what was previously 6 other parts of government.
Yes, thank you. Now, Commissioners, my understanding is that Learned Friend will be taking Mr Ord at a later point in time to the balance of his statement. I think the other question I might have put to Mr Ord, I've better asked after that examination has taken place.
We understand that, Mr.
Yeah. Thank you, Commissioner.
Dharmananda.
Thank you, Commissioners. Mr. Ord, can I ask you please to look at your paragraph 73 of your statement? Do you see that?
Yes,
So you say during your tenure, prior to the release of the Bergen report, the GW Commission sought assurances by Crown Resorts Limited. Were you involved in seeking those assurances?
not personally. That would have been undertaken through Mr Connolly's office, seeking from Crown a response to questions that have been raised in the GWC meeting. So there are action items always minuted, and those, and then the officers undertook consultation with Crown on what they would like us by way of communication back.
So your knowledge of this is from reading some minutes, is it?
From the recalling that we sought Crown to give us an explanation around the matters of staff having been arrested in China, and that was connected to their promotion of junket activity, and then as a consequence of the matters that came forward around the 60-minute story, whether these things were being dealt with according to the AML policy documents that they have as part of their operating manual.
But this is at some stage during 2019.
I would, yes, I would believe so.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. Is there anyone on behalf of Mr Connolly?
Sorry, Commissioners, from our table, but there'll be no questions from me.
All right, thank you. Ms Carl, do you want anything arising from that?
No, thank you, Commissioner.
All right. Seawood.
No, thank you. Nothing arising, thank you.
All right. Mr Ord, thank you very much. It's been of great assistance to us. Unfortunately, we can't discharge you. We will need you to come back, and it's likely to be in the week commencing the 24th of May, but we'll give you as much notice as we can. Thank you. Thank you. We'll,
I think we have a changing of the guard.
yes, we'll need Mr Futrell.
Commissioners, while the change of the guard is taking place, the non-publication order that the Crown just sought, is it an opportune moment to deal with that non-publication order now?
I think we'll deal with it later in the day, because we want to get through the
Yes.
through the evidence.
Thank you, Commissioners.
There'll be a slight delay, Mr Sergeant. If you'd like to take a seat. Now, Mr. Sergeant, if you would come forward, please, and just, if you wouldn't mind just remaining standing at the witness box. Could you just state your full name for the record?
Barry Andrew Sargent.
And do you wish to take swear an oath or take an affirmation?
I'll swear an oath. I, Barry Andrew Sargent, swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give to this commission shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. Mr. Evans?
Commissioners, Mr. Sargent, you have made a witness statement for the purpose of these proceedings.
Yes, correct.
You have a copy of that?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. You've read the contents of it?
Yes,
You are satisfied, to the best of your knowledge and belief, that its contents are true and correct?
yes.
Commissioners, I tender the witness statement on behalf of Mr. Sargent.
Thank you. The witness statement of Barry Andrew Sargent dated the 10th of May, and which bears the number GWC.0003.0002.0001 will be admitted into evidence as an exhibit.
No supplementary question.
All right, thank you. Mr. Futrell.
May it please the Commission. Mr. Sargent, when you received your summons to give evidence, you received a schedule of topics you're invited to cover in your witness statement.
Yes.
And your witness statement that's just been tendered, that covers all the matters on those topics you wish to give evidence to the Commission on.
Yes.
What I'd like to do today is take you through some of the topics you have dealt with, and ask you to expand and clarify on some of the matters referred to in your statement. Some questions may go a little further than what you've said, and it might go a little bit beyond the scope, but that's the general idea today, if that's...
Yes, I understand.
Now, I just want to ask you a few questions about your qualifications and experience more broadly, if you don't mind. So, you were the Director General of the Department of Racing, Gaming and Liquor until the 30th of June 2017.
Correct.
And I'm going to refer to that. I know it's got a different name now, but just as a department, you'll understand what I mean when I say that.
Yes.
And I think the department's now known as the Department of Local Government, Sport and Cultural Industries.
That's not quite correct. The department was merged with a number of others, so it wasn't just going from the department to the Department of Local Government. It was just one of the number of departments that were merged to make the new department.
Okay. I just noticed you spoke quite quickly then. Do you mind, because it's transcribed, we need to just slow things down a little bit?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Thanks for that clarification. Now, do I understand correctly that you were appointed into the position of Director General of the Department in 1992?
Back then, it wasn't the department, it was the Executive Director of the Office of Racing and Gaming.
Okay. And that, for all intents and purposes, you occupied the same position?
Yes.
Okay, so you held that position for the best part of 25 years then?
Correct.
Now, as the Director General of the Department, you were also the ex officio Chair of the Gaming and Wagering Commission of Western Australia.
Again, back in 1992, the wagering side wasn't part of the commission. It was only the Gaming Commission of Western Australia at that stage.
Okay, and when did that change?
In 2003, when the wagering was brought into the regulation of the base of the commission, when the Racing and Wagering Western Australia was created.
All right, so for that entire period, there was a commission.
Yes.
One of the responsibilities of that commission was the regulation of the Perth Casino.
Correct.
And you were chair of that commission. Now, in the role of ex officio chair of the committee units, and I'm going to refer to that as the GWC, just because we don't want to confuse it with this commission. You were not remunerated separately at the time you were Director General, were you?
That's correct. I was not.
Okay, now, you've got a bachelor degree and a master's degree in commerce,
Yes,
all right? And before your appointment as Director General of the department, you were employed in the position of Executive Director of Resources and Services in the Ministry of Education,
correct.
and you held that position between 1991 and 1992.
Correct, yes.
And before that, you spent about a year seconded to the position of Commissioner for Corporate Affairs.
Correct.
And so that was during 1990 and 1991.
I was seconded because the Corporate Affairs was being transferred to the Commonwealth, and the Commissioner had resigned, and I was seconded to the position.
And between 1985 and 1990, you held positions in the Department of Treasury.
Correct.
And prior to that, you were teaching accounting and finance at the West Australian College of Advanced Education.
Correct.
It's now the Edith Cowan. All right, so before your appointment as Director General of the department, did you have any experience in gaming operations?
No.
And I take it from that answer you had no experience specifically in relation to casino gaming operations either.
Correct, none.
Now, during your tenure as Director General of the department and as Chair of the GWC, did you undertake any training or education relating to the regulation or relevantly to the regulation of casino gaming operations?
No.
In the course of that tenure, did you attend any conferences regarding casino regulation?
Yes.
Can you recall which conferences?
Well, there was the Australian Casino and Gaming Regulators Conference, and that used to meet annually. Then underneath that there was a CEO's Forum, which used to meet probably twice a year. And there was an International Association of Gaming Regulators as well that I attended, not regularly, but on ad hoc occasions.
So in the case of the Australian regulators, there was an annual conference?
Yes.
And internationally, how frequently would you say you attended an international conference?
Half a dozen times in that time frame. I couldn't, it might be more, but it wasn't, I was not a consistent attendee. All
right. And in taking the Australian conferences to begin with, what in general terms is the subject matter of those conferences? What types of matters are raised by the regulatory authorities in Australia?
Initially, a lot of it was about gaming machines, poker machines outside of casinos, because they were being expanded. And initially, Tasmania, Queensland, Northern Territory, I think South Australia and Western Australia had the casino. You didn't have Melbourne Casino nor Sydney Casino initially. And New Zealand was part of that environment, and they were also in the planning stages.
And do I understand that the concern was in respect of regulating the gaming machines themselves?
And the principles applied also to casinos, but fundamentally it was the regulation of gaming machines outside of the casino environment.
And broadly speaking, does that mean understanding how the machines are calibrated?
That, but also just the monitoring of them. It's much easier to monitor machines in a casino than it is throughout a state situation. So, but the principles were still there. But over time, the casinos became more prominent because more of the jurisdictions had the casinos. So there was an equal sort of distribution.
Okay. When you say monitoring, what precisely are you referring to by that activity?
Well, one of the things is always the revenue that's being generated by them. The second one is to ensure that they've been played according to the rules. And I should imagine in a distributed network like it is in New South Wales or others say we don't have them in Western Australia, such as you know, then you have to ensure that the communication techniques are there. Now, in some states they actually contract it out to private sector people. In other places it was government did it.
Okay, so was the focus of the nature of the regulation, if you like, on I'm going to paraphrase it, you can agree with me or disagree with me, it's up to you. Essentially, fairness of the machines operating so that those that are playing those games know they're playing a fair game.
In Western Australia's case, we had a minimum return of 90 cents on the dollar. So that was the focus of the monitoring at the casino. In some of the other states, the game machines could have had a lower payout ratio, and they would monitor them according to achieving that ratio.
All right, again, just so I understand, when you say a payout of 90%, that means that the, if you like, the house advantage is 10%.
Correct.
And your monitoring is to ensure those machines are calibrated correctly in that way?
Yes.
And presumably also, I was going to the second point, which is obviously there's a royalty or a payment made to the state for the use of the gaming machines?
Under the casino agreement, which was attached to the Act, they initially had to pay 15 cents tax on the gross win.
So the focus was also on ensuring that the correct amount of revenue was
Correct.
bluntly making its way to the state coffers.
Correct.
Okay, now was there any, to your recollection, was there any discussion at these forums concerning what one might refer to as the social vices associated with gambling?
Problem gambling, those issues were raised quite frequently.
So problem gambling is one matter. What about the more broad risks associated with activities in a casino or gaming environment?
Well, per se, most of the concern was about the probity checks on people who are being licensed, or if you had people wanting to buy into a casino and have activities in other states. They used to complain about the fact they had to apply in each state. It wasn't a matter of a unified system throughout Australia. But those discussions were pretty basic because there was very much reliance on police information in regard to probity. But the issues were about having a common application form. So if a person was to apply for a licence, say, to be a croupier in New South Wales or WA, then that particular application form would be the same across the country. But it's very hard to achieve that.
I see. So when you're referring to probity checks, the focus again is on effectively the operational aspects of casino gaming, where employees of the casino licensee are being given permission to effectively run games in the casino environment.
To be croupiers in particular, and then to work around the machines as well.
And the probity check there, the concern there is that because it may, people involved in those activities may cheat the customers?
Well, there's that aspect, but the upfront is the criminality side. The Casino Control Act talks about having suitable people in the organisation, and so the licensing process was to check that. It didn't mean to say that if a person had some criminal record, they couldn't be licensed, but at least the Commission knew about it if they were to be licensed.
Okay, again, I'm just going to remind you to slow down a little bit.
Sorry, I apologise.
You may be talking a little bit too quickly for the transcribers. Okay, now what about, was there any discussion in the national forum level about the probity of the owners and operators of the licensees?
No, I wouldn't say there's very much of that.
All right. Now, in terms of moving to the international conferences you attended, can you recall any specific conferences you attended now?
Would you want to just locations? Is that what you're looking for? Or?
Locations and time frame.
I think the most recent one was in Sydney. There was one in Singapore prior to that. Maybe Sydney was 16. I just can't recall exactly, but then Singapore 14. It was some time before then. I think around about, it was in the US state of Washington, 2010, 2009. I had one in, I think, Portugal.
So you attended a number.
Oh yeah, about 6 or 7, something like that. Yeah. But as I said, I did not go every year. I was not a constant attendee at the conferences.
Okay, now in the international sphere, what was the, if you like, the focus of the conference materials of the conferences you attended?
Well, it varied from year to year. I know one of the things, again, was to try and get a uniform application process, because at that stage, many of the applicants were wanting to operate in many jurisdictions, and that had issues in the US as well, because they, like Australia, is a federation, so therefore the states had particular requirements and it wasn't a national area. I can recall things like developments in marketing, how technology could basically override much of what was being offered in Australia in terms of gaming machines, and the technology was there, and it was a warning that could be what was currently on offer, and the machines could be overtaken. Tables wasn't that particular problem, because you play roulette, doesn't matter where you play it, roulette's roulette, but it's the gaming machines were the one that could be developed. So the machines in Perth are very much standalone machines, whereas you could go to them server-based, which means you could have one server somewhere located within the environment, and that's then going out to all the machines. Or you could even nowadays have the cloud involved. That has not happened, but they're the sort of developments that are coming in. And associated with that was the marketing side, which it could be done to encourage people to come again.
So attending the conferences, is this both the regulators and the regulated?
With the International Association of Gaming Regulators, they used to tie it in with some of the operators, but they were two separate conferences, and the only thing they shared were probably the social functions. So that quite often it was more open for the regulators to attend the operators conference, but we were very guarded on the operators attending the regulators conference. There was a distinction between the two.
So when you're referring to electronic gaming, was that possibly the more recent conferences where there's been, if you like, the advances in online gaming activity?
I would say go back to 2010.
I see.
2010.
And at these conferences, was there any discussion, to your recollection, or conference papers given concerning risks associated with what might call the questions of probity of operators?
It was more aimed at the processing of applications. It wasn't going behind the probity of the applicants per se.
Okay, now I'm making an assumption here that over the course of your tenure as Director General, you gained an understanding and appreciation of gaming operations at the Burswood or Perth Casino.
Yes.
And what was the primary source of your the information you obtained about how those operations were conducted?
Well, when I took up the position in 1992, there was a Chief Casino Officer who was the inaugural Chief Casino Officer. He was qualified in law. He had come from the Tasmanian Gaming Commission, and he'd also worked as a croupier at the casino. And he was very well respected internationally with the other regulators, and he was a very good source of knowledge for me.
And are we talking about the person's name? Is that David Halliday?
No, Mr. Michael Egan.
Michael Egan, right. Mm-hmm. And so, by what means was he imparting this information to you? Is this your role as Chair or as Director General of the Department?
It would have been as Director General.
And what was the procedure by which the information was provided to you?
Well, over time, we'd have briefing sessions, and he'd bring me up to speed on particular matters and demonstrate things to me at the casino. It was just an on-job training.
Okay, so you did on occasion attend the casino for a site, some sort of site visit?
I would attend the casino very frequently.
Okay, and when you attended the casino, what was the purpose of your attendance?
Well, again, initially was to generate knowledge about the environment and the games. But I didn't go there to actually learn how to play the games, but I was more concerned about the supervision and how the overall internal controls of the casino operated. I was there to witness the count, the cash count. In those days, it was very much a coin count as well. It was a different environment. And initially, when I went, they also took me up into the things for the catwalks, but they had stopped being used because by that time the CCTV surveillance had improved, and plus the catwalks were occupational hazard. You get smoke and dust up there, so it wasn't good. But you get a good environment of what was going on. But particularly the CCTV coverage of the casino was a very important part of that operation.
Okay, now the cash count. Who was responsible for undertaking the cash count?
Oh, that was the casino operator.
And what mechanism? You might break this up into different periods of time. What mechanism, at least when you initially were the chair of GWC, was utilised for monitoring that process by the GWC?
Well, it wasn't monitored by the GWC per se. It was monitored by the inspectors. So we had at that point inspectors embedded into the system. So an inspector would sit there with the cash count, and they'd be locked up with everybody else until it was all done, and then they'd come out.
And these inspectors, who employed the inspectors?
The Department of Racing, Game, Liquor. I'll call it the department. The department.
So there were inspectors employed by the department who were physically located. One at the casino.
Yes, to participate in the count, they'd be ticking off on certain controls.
And what if any other inspectors were there at that time?
We used to have about on average 4 on duty at a time.
And were they all involved in this cash counting exercise?
No, only one.
What other activities were the inspectors undertaking?
Well, they would have done some audits, again, checking to see that the games had been played in accordance with the rules. There was audit programs that had been developed, and I think some of those have been listed in the initial information that was sought by the Commission, the sort of programs that were done. They're transactional based. They'd also check correctly things like the supervision levels in pits, because that was an important part of the arrangements. You had procedures to follow in the cage where the money was actually first taken, and then you had procedures involved with the taking of the drop boxes from the tables and the machines into the cash count, into the accounting area. You had procedures involved for opening tables, closing tables. So the whole casino manual operations was the basis of which the casino was regulated.
Okay, so the procedures you've just described, several of them, I couldn't keep track of all of them, but they are to be found in the operations manual of the casino, are they? Or they were at the time?
Under the directions, there's the operations manual, and then there's also the game rules. And they're the two fundamentals of the check. The third area, of course, was to make sure the revenue which was being generated was being properly accounted for.
Okay, so you mentioned earlier in your answer, you mentioned audit procedures that had been developed. Are the audit procedures provided for in the operations manual, or are they separate procedures of the department?
It was a procedure to actually audit that particular manual at certain operations. So the instruction would be that you'd be checking to see what was said to be done. You'd then check to see that it was actually done.
Okay, and those procedures, who developed those procedures?
They would have been developed initially by Mr. Egan.
By Mr. Egan as the Chief
Casino Officer.
And were those procedures, to your knowledge, approved by the GWC?
Well, the casino commenced operations in December 1985. At that stage, there was a casino control committee. They would have approved the initial procedures, and the Gaming Commission didn't come into operation until about October 1987. So the Commission would have just assumed them from the Casino Control Committee. So fundamentally, the procedures would have started from day one. If they were changed, they would have been approved by the Commission.
Okay, so at the time that you commenced in your role as chair of the committee in its, or the GWC in its then form, your understanding was that the audit procedures had been in place for some time,
Yes,
and there was no change in 1992 at least to the audit procedures.
no.
Were there changes to the audit procedures subsequently?
Would have been, I can't recall, there would have been some minor changes because you could have had changes to the manuals. There would have been changes in about early 2000, 2002, I think, when we went from having a 24-hour presence at the casino with inspectors, and we had an extended period, but not 7 days a week, and that meant we had to change some of the procedures which we actually had inspectors embedded in them. So I was going back to more of a traditional internal control mechanism.
So just I'd like, if you don't mind, just to step me through that. So there was a process you called embedded, the inspectors were embedded. What do you mean by embedded?
It's a bit like the cash count. The inspector was there doing things, whereas there are some activity regarding some of the international businesses where they were doing buy-ins and settlements. They'd have inspectors and those present to witness it, whereas it's possible that those sort of procedures can be audited after the event to make sure everything is ticked in accordance with the procedures.
Okay, so at some point in time, to the best of your recollection, early 2000s, the procedure went from one where there were people embedded, as you termed it, to a more audit-based procedure? Okay, so what when you say you're looking at events afterwards for auditing, what to your knowledge was the audit procedure adopted by the GWs or the inspectors at that time?
Well, I can't recall the specifics, and I don't know what went through, but if there was a change to the procedures to accommodate the change in inspectors, then the procedures would have been changed, and that then would have been reflected in a change in the audit process to reflect that procedural change.
Okay, so you said earlier that the audit there was an audit procedure of some kind in place when you became chair. To your knowledge, was there a change in the audit procedure that was taken to the GWC for approval?
Well, my recollection, and according to what I would have liked to said, yes, it should have gone to the commission. That wouldn't have been done independent by the department.
When you say should have, is that something you remember taking place, or is it
I honestly can't recall, but it should have happened because in my view, that was a commission decision. That was a significant decision to go from 24/7 to having on a reduced basis. So I would doubt very, very much if that hadn't gone to the commission.
Okay. And does that, to your knowledge, does that remain the position today? There is a reduced presence and some audit activity?
Oh yes, there's even a probably more reduced presence because we had it in place whereby the inspectors would have been rostered so that for a period of time they'd be embedded. So I shouldn't use that word embedded because we changed, but they were located out at the casino. And that meant some inefficiencies because we could roster inspectors who do liquor, community gaming as well, and sometimes we weren't getting the full utilisation of them. So we changed the system, I think about 2015, and that would have gone to the commission, whereby an inspector could go out to the casino to do a particular task and audit. Then they could go and do maybe at a certain time something at a hotel, or they could go and do a community gaming one. So they weren't just going to the casino and staying in the casino for the whole shift. So that gave us some economies out of that. But that I do remember went to the commission.
Okay. And you think that was in 2015? And since 2015, to your knowledge, have there been any additional changes to the
Not that I'm aware of, no.
procedures? Okay. Commissioners, I'm not sure what time you intended to take a break this morning.
I think if you go through to around about 20 past.
Okay. All right. Now, obviously, we've we've dealt with you ceased in the position of Director General of the department in June 2017. Was that a retirement, was it?
No, that was as a result of the machinery of government changes. And the position of Director General of the Department of Asking Legal was abolished.
Right. And do you have any full-time employment now?
I was then became a consultant for the Public Sector Commissioner, but they knew that I had already announced my intention to retire in March of 2018. So it was just a matter of doing I did some other tasks for the Minister during that period of time, but I was no longer Director General of the Department.
Okay, so as of today, you essentially retired?
Yes.
All right. Now, you were appointed as an ordinary member of the GWC in 2017.
Correct.
And at the time of your appointment as an ordinary member, who were the other members of the GWC?
Mr. Duckworth, Professor Colleen Hayward. Who else was there? Oh, I think Mr. Rob Bovell. Yeah.
And Mr. Ord became the chair of that committee.
He became ex officio chair of the. He was chair because I was a month out of the position. Yeah.
Yes. Now, each of those members of the committee you just mentioned, they were appointed while you were chair of the GWC.
Yes.
As chair of the GWC, were you provided with any information about the qualifications and experience of people appointed as members of the GWC?
Back in 1992? No.
What about for each of the people we've just described? Were you given information about them?
In the main, I was not consulted. I think over my years as the chair, I might have had influence on. I suggested 2 names. The rest of the time, I was just advised or requested to draft a cabinet minute.
Yes, I'll come back to the process of appointment, but I'm just wondering, were you provided at any time with information about the qualifications and experience of the people appointed to the committee?
No. Other than the two when I did nominate 2 names I knew beforehand.
Okay, now, in the course of acting as chair, did you become aware of their qualifications and experience?
After they were appointed?
Yes.
Yes.
And by what means did you become aware of that?
Normally from the individuals themselves, or no, it would have been, no, I'm wrong. It would have been because I would have been drafting the cabinet minute for the minister, and therefore you'd be putting up a CV of the person who's been appointed.
I see.
And sometimes you had to go to the member though, the proposed member, to get that CV.
Okay, so perhaps we should start with the order of events. A vacancy arises, just talk with the general at the moment. A vacancy arises. Was it your practice to make a recommendation to the minister as to how that position may be filled?
No.
So on a vacancy arising, you didn't have any making recommendations. For instance, a person with particular qualifications experience would be desirable for the committee?
Well, it depends on to some extent of what sort of thing we're looking for from the people. If I can go back to 1992 when I became the the Executive Director of the department, there was a change of government in 1993 March. That was the senior minister then, the Honourable Max Evans, who was a respected chartered accountant, did talk to me about some vacancies coming up, and the question was, well, what sort of people are we looking for? Now, I can generally remember, because that influenced my thinking probably for the whole 20-odd years in relation to the appointments, was looking at the Gaming Commission to start with, and it was more specific about the interests and of the community, what it needed. There's a couple of references to the community interests in the Act, but there was no mention about specific requirements other than saying people had to have integrity, repute, and a relevant experience. And looking at what was being provided, I think we discussed that you were looking for someone who could represent the community interests in regulating not only the casino, but also community gaming outside the casino. To some extent, the Casino Control Act also has some reference to the public interest, and does give some specific reference there. And there are, for instance, in the sections on the 21A, if the Commission was to make a recommendation to the Minister about the investigation, he has to look at the public interest of doing it. And I think there's some other reference there to the Commission if they have to, if I remember correctly, do something with respect to considering the surrender of a licence, had to look at it in the public interest. So I think between us, I came to the conclusion with him that you're looking for people who could represent the interests of the community, not necessarily to regulate gaming per se, relying more on the expertise within the department.
All right, well, I want to come back to this question of the interest of the community in a moment. Before doing so, the GWC can have a minimum, I think, of 5 and a maximum of 7 members. So you could, theoretically at least, cover the community interest without all 5 or all 7 having that particular qualification. Was there any consideration given to specific skills or skill sets of members that would be desirable for the regulator of gaming, and more particularly the casino gaming operations?
Well, I felt confident that the expertise was within the department to provide that advice to the Commission. If at some stage we did have some lawyers involved in the Commission, if people were available in the accounting field, it could possibly have been. I can't recall an accountant being approached. There were some people who didn't want to be on the Commission. They'd want to be involved in gambling as well. But given the nature of the way that the Commission was working, it was because the casino itself was a monopoly. The casino then had to be a regulator from the point of view of what's in the public interest. For give you an example with respect to the return on gaming machines, that return could have been basically increased from 90 cents of the dollar to 95 cents of the dollar. It could have gone the other way because it wasn't legislated in the legislation. The original Casino Control Committee set it at 90 cents on the dollar. And basically we've kept that because this state is one of the highest sort of returns in respect of the amount that's gambled on a gaming machine is return to player. So that's the decision to be made, is what's in the community interest, in the sense, should we do a 91, 92? Recently the Commission has made the decision to adjust the speed of the games on machines, because the way in which it was initially set up, they used to have a 5 second sort of minimum spin time, but the casino was having many more add-ons and bonus streaks. It was going much later, so the Commission looked at, well, we'll reduce it. So on average it's 5 seconds, not necessarily 5 seconds as a minimum. Again, that had to be considered from the point of view of what's an interest, what's the community interest in making this sort of decision. So that's how I viewed it.
Okay.
And no minister challenged that particular view in the years that I was there. I think I worked for 10 or 11 ministers over that time frame. No member of the Commission ever challenged that to me, that we should be looking for something that they felt that were deficient in what was coming from the department in that area.
So just perhaps before we break, let's ask you one question about that. So the Commission. Sorry, I keep on referring to the committee or Commission, but GWC. Yeah. I mean GWC. Whenever I say that.
And I'm guilty of the same thing. I'm sorry.
Yes. So the GWC. Is it your evidence that it received advice from individuals who are employed by the department about matters such as what the payout ratio should be on electronic gaming machines, and the GWC considered that, and whether that ratio met its understanding of the community interest?
in principle, I can't recall we ever going to the Commission to actually challenge the 90 cents on the dollar. But I do recall that the 5 second issue for the Commission. Another one I do recall is if you play the game of roulette, it normally has 1 0 on the table. And what that means, if it falls on 0, the house takes it all. You can have roulette with 2 zeros, which means you increase the house advantage. Now, I do recall the casino coming to the Commission at that stage, seeking permission to introduce some 2-0 games, because what they were finding is that the minimum bets were getting too high for people. So the argument was presented to the Commission and processed through the inspectorate group within the casino that if this was to happen, then this would enable the operator to offer the game at a lower level. So I can recall making it quite clear the rules had to specify if you play a double roulette machine, you'll get less odds, but it's cheaper to play. So that was a decision the Commission had to make. Is that in the community interest?
In your time on the GWC, can you think of any instance where the GWC has not accepted the advice of the Department on matters of that nature?
I can't recall any, no. There might have been times when things were sent back for a bit more clarification. But generally, the casino had the right to apply for a approved game of rules of games which are internationally played, and 0-0 roulette is a common game throughout the world. It's not like they are inventing it purely for Perth. It is a common game. In some jurisdictions, that's all you'll get is a 0-0 roulette. But it just changed the payout of the game. That's all it does.
Right, thank you, Mr. Sargent. I think that would be appropriate time.
We'll resume at 11:35. Thank you.
Hearing is adjourned.
Please be seated. Yes, Mr. Butrell.
May it please the Commission. Sergeant, just prior to the break, I asked you some questions related to the appointment of members of the GWC, and you made reference to their being appointed to have an eye, I'm paraphrasing you, so forgive me for that an eye to the community interest. And you made a reference sometime later to Section 21 capital A of the Casino Control Act and the reference to public interest.
The reference there was the fact there was a decision being made which did refer to the public interest. That was all. And the public interest, I think, is defined in the Control Act. It says public interest having regard to.
Yes, what I'm going to ask is, are you using the community interest and public interest synonymously?
In effect, yes.
And what is your understanding of the GWC's role, if you like, in dealing with the community interest as you understand it?
Well, ultimately, is to ensure that the community has confidence in the casino as an institution, but also in the games that people play, so they feel comfortable going there and they're going to get what's been offered according to the rules. That is so. The Act also requires, under the Gaming Commission Act, to give due regard to potentially the harm as a result of gambling at the casino, the problem gambling aspects, which has been addressed over time. But from my experience, the public interest is not defined per se in legislation. It's not an easy one to put a handle on. That's why I was quite encouraged to have a group of people who had very different backgrounds to look at something and trying to come up with something which could represent what the community would think is fair and reasonable.
Okay, can I just, so I understand, I'll try and categorise what you said, and again, if you don't agree with me, I'll say feel free to disagree with me. So one aspect of it, it seems, based on your answer, is meeting community expectations and about the fairness of the games that they are playing at the casino. And we've dealt with that earlier in today, relating to the inspectors, making sure that the machines are properly calibrated and paying out correctly and all those things. The other aspect you said, I think you said harm to the community, and you mentioned in that context you mentioned problem gambling. Do you consider, as a member of the GWC, that there's any other aspect of harm to the community that falls within the scope of the GWC's remit?
I would say that looking at that, not from the point of view of appointing people, but I was conscious of the remit that the thrust of particularly the Casino Control Act talks about the suitability of people, and so therefore you're going to the aspect, doesn't use the word criminality, but obviously that's part of it, that if there is anything to do with involvement of even croupiers who may have some attachments to criminality, then obviously that would be a harm to the community. But paying the appropriate amount of taxes, make sure that otherwise they're underpaying it, then that would be ultimately some negative aspect to the community.
Now when you speak of suitability, and you mentioned croupiers, and we've been over that earlier today about probity and permitting people to be involved in gaming activities, are you confining suitability to those who are operationally involved in the casino operations? Would you see it more widely than that?
Well, we had key employees, so the chief executives, the chair of boards, which were seen to be in control of the operation, had to be licensed, and they held key employee licences. So their suitability as well. Now, we have got in the legislation provisions regarding associates of the casino. We could invoke those if there was ever an occasion whereby we had information to do with the people who had an association with the casino. It may not be desirable or suitable. We also had sections there related to control contracts. So you have the potential, if a contract over a prescribed limit, we could investigate. We could actually, the prescribed limit could be changed, obviously, as a regulation, but you're concerned with that people who were contracting were suitable as well. So there are aspects of that, so that people who are involved in it, from the point of view of the management, croupiers, and people who are supplying services to the casino, are suitable.
Okay, now the suitability or the probity checks are done at the outset when those people are given the permissions to occupy those positions. That's
That's right.
Now, with respect to the gaming machines and the table games, and where in the past you had people embedded, I think you said, and then you've moved to a more remote audit process, the Commission is, or the GWC is actively involved in ensuring it meets the requirements of fairness that we've discussed, the fairness in terms of the machines paying out when they should, and that the revenues to the state are being recovered as they should be.
Well, audits are done, and if there was an adverse finding, then that would come to the Commission to be dealt with. If it wasn't, if there was no adverse finding, then it would basically be done at the management level, but it was adverse findings.
So if there's an adverse finding of an audit, you would expect that to be reported to the GWC?
Definitely.
At a meeting?
Yes.
Now, insofar as monitoring the suitability questions, so the individuals involved at the operational level and those involved in more senior management, what, if any, processes, to your knowledge, were implemented by the GWC in monitoring those aspects of the
When the casino was opened, people were actually given a licence in perpetuity. I can't recall when, sometime may have been in the year early 2000, we actually changed it to a 5-year period, so every 5 years their licence has to be renewed. And what that does, they have to go and get a police clearance from the police to have their licence renewed, and we also do a check the other way on a sample basis. So we did go from a place whereby it was up to us to actually do the probity checks to having at least a 5-year renewal program.
I see, and this is, and can I just be clear, you're confining your remarks there to the individuals who you have previously, or use the expression licensed, to be involved in some activity in the casino.
But if they want to continue to be worked at the casino, they have to have their licence renewed.
Okay,
And
now
that's on a 5-yearly basis.
beyond those matters, were there any aspects of the suitability or probity, to use that word, of the casino operator or casino licensee that were within the consideration of the GWC?
Nothing ever came before the Commission that I can recall during the time that I was there. The casino agreement, which is subject to an Act of Parliament, doesn't provide for the renewal of the licence under any investigation. However, we did participate, and I know in my time, when the Victorian review was done, because we had the Crown Resorts controlling both casinos, we saw that as a de facto way of just showing that the probity of the holding company, which was Crown Resorts, and the associated companies were still of suitable standard. And during that time, there was no time when the licence wasn't renewed. The last review, which was done, I think, at the end of 2018, the recommendations which came from that, the Commission did put them to the operator here to address and come back and respond to them. But there was nothing in the legislation, the agreement, which required their licence to be renewed annually or 5-yearly.
Okay, so are you making reference to the Victorian regulators' review of Crown Melbourne?
5-yearly review, yes.
Each 5 years, and is it your evidence that the GWC had regard to the reports prepared by the regulator in Victoria?
Yes.
Were they published publicly, or did you acquire them by some other means?
No, we just got them whenever they're challenged, but I can't recall them being of a private means. No, I don't think they were private.
Okay, and were those reports the subject, to your recollection, of any discussion at the meetings of the GWC?
The last one, and I would say I can't recall specifically before then, but I know that we did discuss one sometime, but I can't recall the specifics. But definitely the last one was because there's quite a few recommendations came out of it.
And it's your evidence, is it, that you put those recommendations to the operator of Crown Casino in Perth?
Yes.
And the licensee in Perth?
They responded accordingly.
And, okay.
Mr. Futrell, could I just ask a question? I'm interested in this question of the Victorian system of reviews. In your capacity as Director General and as Chair of the GWC, did you ever turn your mind to that question and ask yourself whether an open-ended licence with no set reviews was the most appropriate way that this should happen?
In latter years, probably no, but the initial years, I can recall discussing, particularly with the Honourable Max Evans at some stage, but it was embedded. It wasn't embedded in the agreement, and I know that if you wanted to change, there had to be some enthusiasm from a minister to actually renegotiate that agreement with that 5-year clause. So it wasn't something which I pursued in my time as Director General.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, we might come back to this topic a little later, but for now, we've got a little sidetracked. I was dealing with the appointment of the members of the GWC. I want to come back to that because you mentioned earlier, I think, that you were responsible, or you prepared something for the Minister to go to Cabinet.
Yes.
Now, I expect that's some sort of briefing note at the time of the appointment of the new members to the GWC.
Yes.
So, and you were preparing that briefing note, I expect, in your capacity as Director General of the Department.
Correct.
So you became aware then, before the appointment of the relevant members, of what their general qualifications and experience were. Were there any occasions upon which you considered that, having regard to their qualifications and experience, they would not be a suitable member for the GWC? No. Now, so that the process then, I think in your statement you've said that you were normally told about the appointments as opposed to being consulted on them. Did you have any contact with the nominees prior to their appointment, as in meeting them as the chair of the GWC and getting a general sense of whether they're going to fit in with the rest of the members?
No, I didn't. If I'd become aware of somebody who could be unsuitable, I'd pay more emphasis on unsuitability than whether they were suitable. I can't recall anybody not making a good contribution in the time that I was there. Yeah. As the Director General of the Department.
Okay, and a little earlier you mentioned there were, I think, a couple of occasions when you did make a recommendation. Do you recall when that was?
One would have been back in, again, Honourable Max Evans. It was a woman who was the former Director General of the Education Department, who had retired, and the other one was Mr. Rob Bovell, who was recently, because he had been the Chief Executive for the Trotting Association, but he had good knowledge on bookmaking.
I see. So, and he actually was appointed, Mr.
Yes.
Bovell, wasn't he? Was that on your recommendation then?
Yes, and it was a verbal discussion. It wasn't me putting a briefing to the Minister at all. Yeah.
I see. And you nominated Mr. Bovell because of his experience in relation to effectively wagering or trotting.
Well, he knew the wagering industry better than any of us on the board. Yeah.
I see. So that's an example, isn't it, where a person, you identified a person who had relevant experience that would be of use for the GWC, and you made a recommendation. The other occasion, do you remember the individual in question?
She was the Ms. Margaret Nadyborn. She was the Chief Executive of the Ministry of Education back when I was there, and she had, I think, gone to head up one of the private colleges, and she retired. And I did recommend her. I don't think it was one I had to push too strong, because the Minister was quite enthusiastic about appointing her, but she was a person who I thought had very good upstanding, good qualification, again, to represent the public and the community interests very well.
So she was also appointed on your recommendation then?
Well, that one was just a mutual discussion. I think Rob Bovell was more of a recommendation, because the Minister didn't know, whereas the Minister knew quite closely about Ms. Nadeau.
I see. So would it be fair to say that on the two occasions you did become involved in making recommendations, the two individuals in question were ultimately appointed as members of the GWC? And so what was your reasoning for not becoming involved in the appointment of anyone else on other occasions?
Well, as the Director General, I saw it more as the Minister and Cabinet's prerogative.
You didn't consider, from the perspective of the chair of the committee, that you had a role in assembling a group of people that would perform the functions of the GWC?
Well, I again, go back to, I wasn't looking for gambling or gaming experience, other than Mr. Bovell was a case in point. But I was looking more for the community interest side, and at times I didn't necessarily have any access to people better than what the Minister or the Governor of the day would have.
I see, but okay. Now, I think we mentioned earlier, when you were chair of the committee at ex officio capacity, your remuneration was set by your position as
Yes.
something additionally paid to you for your position of chair.
Can I comment? The only time I got an additional allowance was when I was a member of the Christmas Island Casino Surveillance Authority. The Salaries and Allowance Tribunal gave me about a 5% allowance at the time I was on there, and I think we used to get about $16,000 a year from the Commonwealth, and I was paid about 10 or something like that. That's the only time I was paid an allowance, but I was only a member of that authority.
Okay. Thank you for that qualification. So, upon your appointment as an ordinary member of the GWC, is there an instrument of appointment or a contract of employment or something of that nature?
No, all I can recall is after a meeting at the Minister's office, the decision was made that I would be appointed, and the department, the bureaucracy, appointed me.
I see. Did you get a letter from the Minister?
Yes, I did.
And you've given some evidence in your statement about the remuneration you've received in that position. And how is that remuneration set?
The remuneration it was set by, in effect, under delegation from the Minister of Public Sector Management. It was done by the Commissioner of the Public Sector Commissioner, and they were set rates across the whole breadth of public bodies. And it was one that was there when I became the chair back in 1992, and all it was increased by CPI or other things over time. I don't think it increased much in principle.
I see. So the GWC has no role in determining the remuneration of its members?
No.
Okay, I think you've said you spend between 6 and 10 hours per month performing a role on the GWC, and I take it that includes preparing for and attending meetings?
Just reading that, yes.
And there's no meeting in January?
Normally there's not, but if there was going to be one in relation to the Bergen requirement, that didn't happen. But if it needs to be, the date was always set aside if need be. And at times there might have been the odd special meeting. We had some issues to do with people who'd been barred from the casino, and we had some special meetings to address that.
Now, it's fair to say there's a fair bit of material in those papers for the meetings, isn't there? So your 6 to 10 hours may be an underestimate, do you think?
Well, it's the familiarity with some might have helped, because I had been there for some time. Some of the papers you got was a repeat of what the previous meeting might have had, so there was a repetition of the papers. It wasn't necessarily something that was always new.
Okay. Now, in your statement, you have given evidence that the Deputy Director of the Department is by office the Chief casino officer. Do you call that part of your statement? You've got it there. It's in
Yeah.
paragraph
Yeah.
60. What do you mean by the expression "who is by office the chief casino officer"?
The office he holds, he holds a public service position, which is a Deputy Director General, and assigned to that position is the duties of a Chief Casino Officer. And in previous times, it might have been a Director of Gaming, and that particular position could have had the various duties to run to the bureaucracy of the department, of the section of the department. And then as part of that JDF, there would have been a requirement that the person who holds that position is also the Chief Casino Officer.
So is it attached specifically to the position of Deputy Director of the department?
In this case, yes.
And how is it? What's the process by which it's attached in that way?
Well, it's just put in as the duties, and then if the successful applicant, we regard that person as appointed as the Deputy Director General, but he also holds the appointment of Chief Casino Officer.
I see. So again, in your statement, you say that the job description is required and the position is advertised publicly. So when it's advertised, you're saying that the position is advertised with that role
Yes.
in it for that position as Deputy Director of
Yes.
the department. And so is there any consultation at the time of the appointment of the Deputy Director with the members of the GWC about who will be appointed Deputy Director and therefore fulfil that
In
role?
the case of that, I can't recall that position. They were aware that there was a vacancy, but we wouldn't have gone back to consult them.
I see, and it follows the process, does it, of the Public Sector
Service.
Management Act?
Yes.
Okay. Now, does the GWC have any role, to your knowledge, in identifying the particular qualifications and experience for the person to fulfil that role?
No.
Does the GWC have any role, to your knowledge, in identifying the job description for that particular position?
No, it would have just been done within the department.
So the department is responsible for identifying the description of the job for both Director General, Deputy Director General, and for those aspects of the role that meet the description, Chief Casino Officer.
I would suspect that the JDF emphasises more the public service role, and then assigned to that is the chief executive of the Chief Casino Officer. Similar to what would happen in the case of my position, it was very much a public service position, and it would identify the ex officio positions. That's what I can recall.
Yes, I'm sorry. I was going to have to ask you to try to
Slow down.
slow
sorry.
down again.
Sorry.
Yes, I've just been given the message that transcription may struggle. All right. Now, are you aware of what, if any, description there is specifically for the function of Chief Casino Officer?
I can't recall that position was for 2011, 2012, something like that. So I can't recall.
And who filled that position in 2011, 2012?
It would have been Mr. Connolly was a successful applicant. It would have gone through the public service requirement of advertising, and then there was a selection panel, had to be some degree of independence, etc.
Okay, and to your knowledge, are there any key performance indicators for the function of Chief Casino Officer?
The key performance functions for that role would have been those that were developed for the Commission. There wasn't specific ones separate from the Commission as performance indicators.
I don't quite follow that. So what do you mean? There's key performance indicators for the GWC, is there?
There is.
And who developed those?
Over time, they would have been developed by the department and endorsed by the process that required endorsement by the Commission.
So the GWC, the department developed, you understand the department developed key performance indicators for the GWC itself?
Yes.
The GWC then endorsed those.
Yes.
And how does the GWC measure performance against those indicators?
Well, it's just that annually you produce what was the target, was the target performance, and assess that against the actual, and then they're just subject to audit.
And the same performance indicators apply to the chief casino officer.
Basically, because through the structure of the agency, he was the one that was accepting the day-to-day responsibility. So, from my perspective, I saw it was appropriate that he be judged on that.
When you say you consider it appropriate he be judged on that, was that in your view as chair of the GWC or as an ordinary member today?
I would suggest more as a Director General of the department than I would have of either of them
I see.
when I was there.
So would that requirement that you measure the performance of the chief casino officer against the same KPIs be recorded in the minutes of a meeting of the GWC, do you think?
Probably not, no. I don't recall that.
Would that have been communicated to the chief casino officer?
But the fact that, from my perspective, I viewed the performance of him in relation to the casino, the Gaming Wagering Commission, one and the same.
So
now, I can't recall the sort of discussions, but Mr. Connolly was very much involved in the preparation of the key performance because of his responsibility within the agency.
Okay, so was there an annual performance review of the chief casino officer's performance?
I can't recall doing that formally because we worked very closely with one another, but we used to have discussions about aspects of his performance, and I can recall that it was always good. He did have some issues to do with some interpersonal skills at times, but other than that, I had no fault with his performance.
And is it your evidence that he was involved with you in setting his own key performance indicators?
Yes, he would have been, yes.
And was that done on an annual basis for the year forthcoming?
Because we had to do them for the Gaming Wagering Commission every year. They were a requirement.
Okay. And at the end, in the following year, you measured that against what?
Well, the thing you're looking at is the target number of audits you do, and you would try to identify some degree of violations which would be determined. Now, one of the problems with it, if you wanted to make a performance look good from the point of view of cost, one of the requirements of cost per order or something, you would, and then you have a cost per the number of adverse findings. Quite often with the casino, you wouldn't have many, so it always looked as though it was a very, very costly exercise. But if you had one or two, then you make the performance look quite good. But that was the performance that I looked at in relation to the position that he occupied.
Okay, so that's based on. Am I correct in saying that's based on the effectively the audit process that's undertaken by the inspectors?
No, the Auditor General would have checked those.
The Auditor General set the KPIs?
No, the Auditor General the Auditor General would have just audited the KPIs against those target ones were set by the Commission.
But the targets were to achieve a certain number of audits.
Yes.
I assume you mean I'm getting
Audits
confused. Audits turning up too many times.
Yes, you're correct. Sorry. Yes.
So, target number of audits of the casino operations in a given 12-month period, and then the Auditor General would check to see that the correct or that the target number had been achieved, and if it hadn't been achieved, an explanation would be given for why that was so.
We could report when we achieved those ourselves. The Auditor General will only be confirming that what we provided in the statements was correct.
I see.
We would prepare the fundamental reports.
So, and now the audits that we're referring to here, now I'm not referring to the casino audits, if I could use that expression to distinguish it from the Auditor General's audit. The casino audits are undertaken by inspectors, I think you said earlier.
Correct.
And those inspectors are employees of the department.
Correct.
So in effect, am I right in saying that both the KPI and measuring the KPI is essentially measuring the department's performance of its function in inspecting the casino
As a service to the Gaming and Wagering Commission.
as a service to the gaming and wage. Yes, I think I follow that. Now, we've got paragraph 60 of your statement there. You also make reference again, I think, to government inspectors, and you refer to them in the same paragraph as your reference to the chief casino officer. They're the government inspectors are the people we're just talking about. They're the employees of the department who undertake the audit function at the casino.
Audit and inspections, correct.
Audit and inspection. Sorry, yes,
No,
audit
no.
and inspection. And just for clarity, they are also appointed by, I assume, the Director General under the Public Service Management Act provisions.
Correct.
So they're not employees of the GWC itself.
No. It's interesting, if you look at the legislation, the section about providing the services, one of the subs says that if the Commission wants to employ people who are casual or part-time, it has to get the permission of the Minister. So it's quite clear that the service came from the department.
Yes, so your understanding is that effectively, you're now referring to section 9.1 and 9.2, aren't you, of the...
Well, I accept that. Can't recall,
Okay,
but I accept that, yeah.
You're distinguishing between the one part of the section that refers to the Public Sector Management Act and the other part that refers to getting the Minister's approval. And do I take it from what you've said that your evidence or your understanding of the way that provision operates is that the part of the provision that deals with public sector management, the Public Sector Management Act, is essentially a function of the Director General of the department, and if you want to employ casuals or other people, consultants essentially, then you require the Minister's approval to do that.
I would have interpreted that I, the Director General, could have employed casuals as well, but if the Commission wanted to do it in their own right, they would need the approval of the Minister. That's how I would interpret that.
I see.
Because there was nothing on the Public Sector Act precluding me from employing casuals and part-time people.
Okay, and is it your understanding essentially then, just to be clear about this, that the way in which that section or those provisions operated precluded the GWC from employing directly the Chief Casino Officer and or any of the inspectors that undertook the casino inspections and audits?
Yes, that is my understanding.
Now, Mr. Connolly is not currently occupying the position of Chief Casino Officer, is he?
No, another gentleman's been appointed.
And that's Mr. Beecroft?
Yes,
And he was appointed in February of this year?
yes.
Is he the Deputy Director of the department?
No,
Was the position to fulfil the function of the Chief Casino Officer advertised publicly?
no, I understand it wasn't.
Do you know how the appointment of Mr. Beecroft was made as the Chief Casino Officer?
I think as the Director General of the Department then made the appointment and brought it back to the Commission for support, because it wasn't advertised. It was the fact that Mr. Connolly had stepped aside. They needed somebody in that position, and the Director General had identified Mr. Beecroft as the appropriate person. Now, I don't know whether his JDF was changed or not, but the Commission was asked whether they would support it from my recollection of that meeting.
Okay, so your understanding is Mr. Connolly stepped aside, is that right?
I don't know what's happened, but I understand that there was some stepped aside from that position, yes.
And what is the basis of your understanding? How have you become aware of that?
Just from advice, not so much media, but advice from the members of the Commission. I wasn't. You're looking to be, say, was I formally advised or?
Yes. How did you become aware of that information?
Well, I became aware of the fact, probably the media who made the point, but formally I was advised when the Director General brought the appointment of Mr. Beecroft to the Commission.
So, and when you say the Director General, you're referring to Mr. Ord?
Yes, yes.
And he brought the appointment of the Chief Casino Officer to the members of the GWC. Is that your evidence?
He did. He was looking for the support because I think the scenario in which Mr. Beecroft was to be appointed wasn't the normal scenario. Normally you do advertise and you get time to do it. But this was I think an effort to at least fill the vacancy created by Mr. Connolly stepping aside.
And when you say support, what exactly do you mean by that?
Well, it wasn't us resolving to appoint him.
Right, so there was no resolution to your knowledge?
There was a resolution to support, if I remember correctly. I don't know what the minutes read, but it wasn't the fact that the Commission would make the appointment. It was one because the appointment would have to be made under the Public Sector Management Act, which would have been a Director General appointment.
I see. So Mr. Ord, in his capacity as Director General of the Department, made the appointment of Mr. Beecroft, and he sought, paraphrasing your expressions, support the endorsement of the GWC for that appointment.
That's what I understand, yes.
And is it your understanding that the GWC endorsed that appointment?
Yes.
And did you individually endorse that appointment?
I didn't oppose the resolution.
Well, there's a difference between not opposing and endorsing.
Look, I might have had some reservations, but in the circumstance, I couldn't justify it, so I was happy to go with the resolution.
Did you express your reservations at the time?
No, I didn't, no.
And what are your reservations?
Well, I'm not sure what Mr. Beecroft's qualifications are appropriate, that was all.
What are his qualifications and experience to your knowledge?
Well, it's not in direct casino in gaming matters. But I can understand the reason why I didn't oppose it, because I couldn't think of any other alternative for Mr. Ord.
Okay. Well, what's your understanding of the reason that Mr. Connolly made the position vacant?
Well, there was some reservations in my statement later on. It addresses the issue that his friendship with one of the staff within the casino, and I wasn't privy to the actual scenario or the background to that situation, but it was decided the best was to step aside, given that the Commission was looking at responding to the Bergen inquiry, and if he was still in that position, I understand there were some concerns about the impartiality of the matter.
When did you first learn of the information that suggests that Mr. Connolly was friends with current or former employees of Crown?
Can you be a bit more specific? If you're referring to Mr. Marius per se?
Well, I think you just said that you became aware that Mr. Connolly made the position vacant because of it became public knowledge that he had a friendship with a number of...
Did I say number?
Sorry.
If I said number, I knew I was referring just to one person.
So, okay, who is that?
Mr. Marius, Claude Marius.
Claude.
Yeah,
Marius.
I can't recall what section of the evidence, but I have acknowledged that in my statement.
Right, and when did you become aware of that?
Well, in my statement, I can't recall you exactly, but because when I was asked when it became an issue, October or November of this last year, Mr. Ward rang me to find out because Mr. Connolly had raised his friendship with Mr. Marius back in sometime, I can't remember, it was 2015 or 2014, but I said my best knowledge sometime in 2015.
So
as the Director General.
Okay, so your evidence is that Mr. Connolly raised with you as Director General that he had a friendship with Mr. Claude Marius, and what did he say to you about the nature of that friendship at that time in 2015?
The nature of the friendship was that he had an interest in fishing. Mr. Connolly was a very experienced fisherman and a very experienced boatman, and he had raised with me the fact that this gentleman had been out in a fishing scenario, and I understand there might have been some help with Mr. Marius buying a boat. That I might not have that totally correct, but I think there was something along those lines. So Mr. Connolly asked my view on it. Now, when he discussed it with me, two things I was aware of. One is I didn't see Mr. Marius as an individual who was in the area of decision making where I was involved with oversight of the casino, and secondly, I wasn't aware, and Mr. Connolly confirmed this with me, that there was any obligation that he had to Mr. Marius. So in my considered opinion at the time, I didn't think there was a conflict of interest, and I said I was happy to endorse it. I remember one of the fellow directors of the department raising their concern that I'd made the right decision there. I did reflect on it, and I still think I did. What had happened, I can't recall how long Mr. Marius had been there, but from then right till I retired, I can't recall meeting Mr. Marius, in the sense of I was quite often involved with the senior executives about running the casino. He might recall meeting me at some other stage. The first time I did actually see him face to face was at a meeting of the Commission in, I think, September, October of 2019, when they came in to address some of the issues to do with the Channel 9 and 60 Minutes report. So I didn't see him as a person of influence, and I had absolute faith in Mr. Connolly. I'd worked with him many years. He'd come through the ranks as an inspector, and I knew his integrity.
Okay, now, I think you said a little earlier that someone else raised with you whether you made the right decision, I think. Now, was that in 2015 or later?
I know, it would have been around at the time that I made that decision. Yeah.
Okay, and who was the person that you had that?
I can't recall. I had two or three directors. I know one of them did raise it, and it was good that they did, because I think it was good that. Yeah.
I see. So you had a discussion at the time, and you called him a director. I presume that's a director of the department.
One of the directors of the department, one of the senior people of the department.
And did you bring it to the attention of any members of the GWC at that time?
I don't recall. No, I don't recall bringing it to any members.
Do you think it's something that would have been of interest to the members of the GWC at that time?
Well, at that time, I didn't see it as an issue, but I didn't think that there was ability for Mr. Marius to influence Mr. Connolly. If you look at it now, in the context of what I now know, I may have erred in that regard, but at that time, I didn't see it as a conflict of interest. And I think most members of the Commission would have seen Mr. Connolly never showed any sort of bias or favour towards the Crown.
Okay, now, Mr. What was the source of your information about Mr. Marius's role within the Crown organisation? Was that Mr. Connolly or your own information from your
Just
own
my
experience?
own observation, yeah.
So you knew who he was?
I knew basically who he was, and I knew that he wasn't involved in what I consider. I used to use the word movers and shakers, where that's an appropriate term of people within the organisation.
Okay. Now, were there any other relationships with any other current or former employees of Crown of which you were aware?
There would have been one of our inspectors. Mr. Hume had resigned and went to work for Crown. Obviously, Mr. Connolly knew him from previous time. I couldn't stop that sort of. I didn't see that as an issue that I would address. He never raised it as an issue with me, and I never pursued it. But I knew Mr. Hume had gone there. Mr. Hume knew me as well, quite well. Yeah.
So you were aware that, obviously you're aware that Mr. Hume had been an employee of the department and he'd gone to work for Crown, and you were aware that Mr. Connolly was friends with him?
Well, I wouldn't say friends. I knew they were work colleagues, but the natural thing could be that they would have some association. Mr. Connolly never raised with me what the association with Mr. Hume was.
I see. So you were not aware. You were not aware that he continued to have something more than a work relationship with him after Mr. Hume left the employee
That's
of the
correct.
department.
I can't recall Mr. Connolly raising Mr. Hume with me as an issue.
Anyone else?
The only other one was the Chief Casino Officer, Mr. Egan, did go work for Crown, but I think Mr. Egan was retired about 29 to 29 or something like that. I don't know, yeah. I think it was 2009, but that's when I think he left the employ of Crown.
All right. Now, can I just return to another topic, which is you mentioned some reservations about Mr. Beecroft's qualifications and experience. Are you aware of his qualifications and experience?
Offhand, I'm not aware now, no. Because he was appointed some time ago.
In February this year?
No, but I mean to the department.
Oh, I
He's
see.
a long-serving employee of the department. A very good officer, very good officer.
Yes. At the time that he was, that the GWC endorsed his appointment as Chief Casino Officer, what information was provided to the other members, those who hadn't been in your position as a Director General of the department, about his qualifications and experience?
I don't think any CV was provided. I can't recall at this stage. I don't think a CV was provided.
So what was the nature of the discussion about the appointment of Mr. Beecroft then at the GWC level?
Well, the issue was, under the legislation, you needed a Chief Casino Officer. Mr. Beecroft was a good officer, and Mr. Ord was recommending that the Commission endorse it. I didn't have any alternatives to put up in the circumstance, to be honest. So if one's going to object to something strongly, one has to give a solution to the problem, and we needed a Chief Casino Officer, I think, under the legislation. So I don't think Mr. Ord had much choice, to be honest.
Well, there isn't one option for the position to be advertised publicly?
That could be addressed, but this was the immediate concern now, is to get a person in place.
And so, to your understanding, is the appointment of Beecroft permanent or temporary?
I don't know how Mr. Ord has put it in place, whether it's temporary or permanent, I don't know.
And are you aware, as a member of the GWC, as to what specific functions Mr. Beecroft has been asked to perform as the Chief Casino Officer?
Well, he would be performing those which were associated to Mr. Connolly's JDF, specifically to do. He wasn't to do with the regulation of the casino, so he'd be involved in supervising the inspectors and performing any delegated aspects of the duties.
So you said he would have. So does that mean to say you don't have specific knowledge of what his specific function and role is as under his appointment as the Chief Casino Officer?
No JDF was supplied to the Commission for the position, but there are specific references in the legislation, etc., about the Chief Casino Officer. Now, those particular functions would be performed by the person designated as the Chief Casino Officer.
Yes, you've used an acronym, JDF.
Job description form.
Right.
Sorry.
I made that assumption, but for the benefit of the transcript.
Yeah, the job description form. But he did not occupy the full position. There was someone...
So do I understand, just so I understand the current position, I don't know that I do actually. Mr. Beecroft is fulfilling the function of both Chief Casino Officer and Deputy Director of the department, is he?
No. I understand he's only filling the function of the Chief Casino Officer in relation to his other duties that he performs. He's only a director and does things to do with policy. So he's not doing the Deputy Director General position.
I see. So he's now fulfilling the function of effectively supervising, I think you used the expression, supervising the government inspectors who are undertaking the inspection and audit task at the Perth Casino.
Well, that's what I would have expected.
Okay, so you don't know of your own knowledge?
No, I don't know.
It's an assumption you're making.
Yes.
Just want to ask you take you to your statement again. If you don't mind, at paragraph 21, I've got some questions to ask you about the department support. Now we have I think already touched on this somewhat already today, but I would like to come back to this paragraph in particular. So you've said in there that at all material times the departments provide all the support for the activities of the GWC. You recall you answered some questions of mine concerning like Section 9 of the Casino Control Act. When you use the expression support, what do you mean by that exactly?
Well, the monthly meetings of the Commission involved various sections that is to do with casino, community gaming and the wagering. So the department would provide all the agenda papers, do all the assessment of matters which the Commission had to consider under those three broad headings. So that's what the department was a service. So that in the case of the casino, it would consider any submissions from Crown for changes to something. It would consider new games, consider the discipline of any members. They report the audits that have been undertaken and if any adverse ones. At the last meeting, the previous, not the last one, the one before, we had some adverse reports about casino employees that hadn't reported convictions when they were required under the legislation to report them to the Commission in a certain period of time. So we had to address those. With the COVID close lockdown at that time, it was postponed. But they're the sort of activities which the department would have actually provided all the information for the Commission and then put it forward for them to make a decision.
Okay, so I'm going to try and summarise what I think some of the evidences you've given today, and if you don't agree with it, just explain why and correct me. So, from the answer you've just given, do I understand you to be describing what you might broadly refer to as administrative services? So, collating the papers for the members of the GWC, providing that information to the GWC for its meeting purposes. That's one aspect of the support. And the other aspect we've dealt with earlier today, which is the provision of the inspectors who undertake the inspections and audit function, who in turn, their reports may make their way into papers that are given to the GWC. So am I right in saying there's essentially two aspects of support? There's administrative and there's regulatory support.
Correct. And the regulatory support extended through the community gaming as well. They provided all those as well, not just casino reports.
Yes, so I'm not confining it. I intended to sort of confine it more to the casino aspect, but I understand what you're saying, that there are, and I appreciate that the GWC has a wider function than merely regulating casino gaming, and so it's covering all of the activities of the GWC, but specifically for the purposes of this inquiry, we're dealing with the casino, and so the support you mean there is administrative and regulatory.
Yes.
Now, what can I go back to? If I could put people into the regulatory bucket of support, individuals, as in the people who are performing that function. Approximately how are you aware of who actually fulfills those roles as a committee member? Sorry, a member of the GWC.
I don't understand the question at this stage.
Oh, I'm sorry. It was a rolled up, and yes, you're quite right. I'll rephrase it. As a member of the GWC, and perhaps you might know this also from your earlier position as Director General, how many people within the department fulfil the function of a government inspector, so someone who's undertaking the audits and inspection functions?
Offhand, I couldn't tell you, but part of the problem there is they aren't not dedicated to just casino. They are inspectors across the breadth. Could be 16, but I really can't recall the numbers. But that's that sort of quantity of people.
Okay. In terms of, I guess, in employment phraseology, full-time employee equivalents, are you able to give an indication of how many full-time employee equivalents are occupying, fulfilling that function?
I'd be just guessing.
Was it something that you were aware of when you were Director General?
No, I just saw them as a resource provided to the Commission in relation to the whole gambit of functions, and sometimes it would vary depending on what the issues were available or confronting the Commission. If Crown had put in quite a big submission for something, then we would have to take some inspectors who would normally do audits off to work specifically on that particular program. But I just saw them as a pool of people supporting the Commission, be it casino, be it community gaming, be it wagering.
I see. So their functions were these individuals, whoever they may have been, were specifically allocated to perform the functions of the GWC. Is that the effect of what you just said? Those
inspectors, yes.
They had no broader role within the department?
Sorry, yes. They also performed some liquor inspections, but I was concentrating on the gaming. So the inspectorate had some liquor duties as well, but there were two types of liquor inspectors. Ones that did the audit of going out and checking on facilities, and then there was ones who were just there to check that the plans, etc., were being prepared. They had nothing to do with the Gaming and Wagering Commission, those inspectors.
I see. And were they people with the same kinds of qualifications and experience as the gaming inspectors?
They were the gaming inspectors and the wagering inspectors and the liquor inspectors were basically a pool of people who did the audits across those wagering responsibilities and also the liquor responsibilities.
I see. So they are employed by the department,
yes,
in a government inspectorial role.
Yes.
And they carry out the inspections for the GWC and for the liquor licensing.
Yes.
I think I probably know the answer to this. When it comes to those involved in performing administrative services, are they individually allocated to the GWC?
No. If I can just put a qualification to the fact that you said preparing papers for the GWC, the inspectors would prepare them. Another group of people will actually collate the agendas, take the inspectors' reports. So the inspectors weren't involved in actually putting the agenda together. They'd prepare the documents, but someone else would actually, the secretariat, would prepare and put them into agenda paper. So they'd be a different group of people. And that's where Mr. Beecroft was working, in that area of supplying that sort of support.
The secretariat?
Yeah.
So who's within the secretariat then?
Well, Mr. Beecroft, we called a policy area within I don't know what it is now, but I had a policy area, and part of that policy area had the responsibility of actually providing an executive officer support or secretariat support to the Commission.
So approximately how many people employed in the secretariat area?
I'd be guessing, but Mr. Beecroft, currently, because of the amalgamation of the new department and all the various, like the sport and recreation came together, and I couldn't say what the numbers are. I'd only be guessing.
I see. Were there any allocated specifically though to performing the functions of the GWC?
I'm not aware, but I think Mr. Ward could answer that far better than I could. Yeah.
At the time that you were chair, was there any, or when you were Director General, was there any specific allocation of people to perform administrative functions for the GWC?
No, they would perform them as required and do other functions as well. And a lot of their functions could be involved in drafting minutes for the minister. Ultimately, would require not just a gaming decision, but could be liquor matters. But they were purely a policy area.
Okay. Now, as between the GWC and the department, is there any agreement or arrangement in place that deals with the employment of the regulatory staff and the administrative staff who provide services to GWC?
There wasn't.
So is there any instrument recording, for example, the charges that would be levied for the provision of services by the department to the GWC?
No.
So I take it that the department, as the employer of all of the relevant people, pays their remuneration.
The department pay their remuneration, yes.
So, and it's developed through presumably a budgetary process for the department itself. And there's a recoupment of some of the costs associated with that from the GWC when services are provided. Were you involved as the Director General or as Chair of the GWC in the identification of what charges would be levied against the GWC for the performance of those services?
It was a process generated by more as a departmental one. You'd put the budget together and look at the revenue sources available, and then the revenue source basically was fairly static from the Gaming Wagering Commission, but there was no formal agreement.
All right, but when we talk about budget process, there's two budgets being prepared, is there not? There's one for the department itself, which is obviously bigger, and there's one separately for the GWC, correct?
Yes.
Now, I want to come back to that process, and I will do that in due course. But before I do, could I ask you some quick questions? You mentioned earlier, you raised earlier that the ability of the GWC to employ casual or temporary staff, and also I think you didn't reference consultants, but the provision relates to consultants as well. And in your statement, you have said at paragraph 62 that external consultant experts were used by the department to advise on issues related to the operation of the Perth Casino, and you make reference to Gaming Laboratories Australia having been engaged to assist in the audit of casino gaming revenue. When was Gaming Laboratories Australia engaged, to your knowledge?
Look, it's not one that's ongoing. I can't recall the specifics, but it's the sort of organisation which was used. Since I've been a member, they were used to give some advice on the return to player for gaming machines. They have been employed to look at the casino revenue returns, but they would have been engaged by the department, not through the commission.
Right. Now, obviously,
that's my understanding anyway. That's my understanding.
So when your understanding of the engagement of Gaming Laboratories Australia, is that as of today, or when you were Chair and Director General?
No, more of today. We didn't use them that much. I can't recall. We may have used them once for something. I know we used them once for wagering for something, but I can't recall for the commission, but there could have been something. But this is more a recent time since I was a member.
Okay, so to your knowledge, has the GWC itself ever considered directly engaging the services of consultants or experts to provide it with advice in relation to...
I'm not aware of it, other than possibly the State Solicitor's Office.
And is it fair to say that the reason for that is it was something that would be left to the department itself to determine whether they would engage the services of external experts?
In this scenario, that would have been done in consultation with the commission. It wouldn't have been done independently.
And would it have been done in consultation with the commission because it's something the commission would have to pay for ultimately?
Ultimately, it would pay for through a charge from the department.
So there would, speaking specifically now about Gaming Laboratories Australia, and you may not remember, if you don't, that's perfectly fine. Was there identified a gap in the expertise or abilities of the department that was specifically being fulfilled by Gaming Laboratories Australia? In
the case of the one about the return to play, the department didn't have the skill base to do it. And in the case of the review of the revenue, again, the department would not have had the skill base to do that.
I see. So there was the department itself identified, a a gap in its own skill set, and in consultation with the GWC, it then obtained the advice from external consultants.
That would be my recollection. I would be very surprised if it was done independent to say, here's the report, and now you're going to pay for it somehow. It would have been aware that we needed some help in that regard.
And is this a process? Is this something that happened on more than one occasion, or is the only one that you can recall?
It'd be more than one, but it's more in recent times than before, because the casino did change their management system, and it was more IT based, and we didn't have the skill base to assess it.
Okay, when you say recent times, can you just put a bit of a time frame on that?
Well, I could say since I've been a member, which has been 2017.
I see. So not when you were when you were chair.
I can't recall us bringing them in, but I know we used them for something to do with wagering, and we did something with bookmakers, but I can't recall to do with specifically with the gaming. Actually, I'm wrong there. If it was a bookmaker one, we actually required them to do some work on the betting system that the bookmaker was provided. But I think in that instance the bookmaker was expected to pay for it, not the commission.
Okay, so there'd be no the Director General wouldn't require the approval of the Minister to go and engage external consultants.
No. As long as you're complied with the supply conditions, then we didn't have to consult with the Minister as a department.
Yeah, so if, for example, the department identified a gap in its skill set and its expertise, there would be nothing to prevent it, in consultation with the GWC, we're talking specifically now about the operations of the Perth Casino, there'd be no reason at all why it couldn't engage the services of an appropriately qualified expert to provide it with advice and meet the deficiency in the skill set of the department.
That's correct. Sometimes, not in this case, you could have set up what I call a common use contract. That is, people have already been accredited, and you can just go to that particular panel of people and choose one without having to go through the process of advertising, etc., and getting compliance.
Okay. If I might just, I'm going to leave that topic for now. I'll come back to it, but I just want to deal with something that should take a little less time. Take us through the lunch adjournment, if you like, if you don't mind. Now, as a member of the GWC, I expect you became aware of some notices that were served on the GWC by this commission. Were they brought to your attention?
No.
They were not?
Not until after the event.
Oh yes, but after they'd been served on the GWC, you became aware of them?
Yes.
Are you aware through your position on the GWC that the responses have been made to those notices by the GWC?
I haven't seen the response that went. This is the subpoena from the Bergen inquiry you're talking about?
No, I'm talking specifically about this commission. This Royal Commission served notices on the GWC.
Sorry, so I'm getting confused. So
I'm sorry.
Okay. I was looking at it from the Bergen point of view. So can you repeat the question?
So are you aware that this Royal Commission has served notices on the GWC to produce documents and information to this commission?
Yes, I am.
And are you familiar with the responses that the GWC has made to those notices?
Yes, I am.
Were they provided to you before they were sent to this commission?
At short notice, I think we received them, but the information was, a lot of the information came from the department.
Okay. Were you, I understand that, so you were provided with them before they were sent to the commission though?
Yes.
Were you involved?
The Royal Commission, yes.
Yes, this Royal Commission, I understand. When I'm using the word commission, I mean this Royal Commission. Now, you were given some notice of it before it was sent to the Royal Commission.
That's my recollection, but bearing in mind it was a very rushed exercise in trying to bring it together, because we had some responses which were being looked at by us as a group of commissioners. Then we knew there was a raft of information being requested from the department, and indirectly should have gone to the commission first, and then the commission should have sought it from the department. So I could be getting some things confused.
Yes, look, you might assist. I don't believe there's any difficulty with this.
I didn't refresh myself on the sequence of these events, so
This
can't.
document. So, Paul, I'm going to refer to Annexure A and Annexure B.
I have no difficulty with that, they've already been referred to.
I don't know if these have already been tendered, commissioners, but I'll take Mr. Sargent to QNE .0001, .0001.0001, which is annexure, should be titled Annexure A. And if I could ask that Mr. Sargent would be a good opportunity just if you can scroll through it so you can see the document. It's on your screen.
Sorry, can you go back to the one? I remember seeing that one, that document with the, I think it was something with some payments, wasn't it?
You're looking at the page. Unfortunately, my copy doesn't have the page numbers on it. The document with the stationery of the department at the top.
That one, version on these, I remember seeing that. It's 2.6.
Yes. Now, if you just take your time just to read through it, and if you could confirm for me if you have had the opportunity to read that document before it was produced to this commission.
I was under the impression that had come to the ultimately to the commission. Now I can't because I noticed it's on a letterhead from the I can't recall, to be honest, exactly. I remember seeing it. There's no doubt I've seen it, but I can't recall the sequence of it.
All right, if I could just draw your attention to the two features of it. One is it's on the letterhead of the Department of Government, Sport and Cultural Industries, and if you take the last page, which is a signature, it's been signed by Fiona Roche. It appears to be in the position as Acting Director General.
All I know is I had seen it. I know that we, as a commission, had to respond to some information. Definitely saw that before it was submitted. But this one, all I know, I'm familiar with it, but I can't get the sequence of events. But
yes.
what came to the commission was definitely cleared before it was submitted to the Royal Commission.
All right. Now, you're saying this document was taken to the commission before it was submitted to this Royal Commission?
I can't verify. I can't confirm that. So I'm
Okay.
saying, well, I can recall seeing it, but I can't recall that I know that what question came to the commission, and it was addressed to the commission some questions. I saw that one that was responded. Then I talk about the Gaming Commission now, not the Royal Commission. The Gaming Waging Commission, the GWC. What was basically said on the GWC to be supplied. I can recall getting that before it was submitted to the Royal Commission. This doc, I remember seeing it, and I'm familiar with it, but I haven't got the sequence as to say that went direct from the department to the Royal Commission and not via the GWC.
Okay, so you don't recall if there was a meeting at the GOC where you discussed this and approved
In
this
detail,
content?
no, no.
Can I ask you to look at Annexure B then, which is the next document in the sequence? And again, just ask you to read through it.
Can you stop that one for a minute? Okay, you scroll it up, please. Right, we'll continue now, regulatory framework.
You can take it as much time as you like, Mr. Sergeant.
But I can't control the role of it. Okay, can we just move it forward so I can just go to the next bit of this? It's a good size, that. Okay, keep going. This document I saw before that was submitted because I can remember the reference to the Perth and the Royal Commission. And I think later on in there's some reference also to the fact that the powers of the Commission are very much limited to the site of the casino area. But this one, I'm happy to confirm that we did see this one beforehand.
Okay, now you can see this one has the GWC's stationery on the top of the page. It has not, although it hasn't been signed by anyone on behalf of the GWC. Is it your evidence that this was tabled at a meeting of the GWC?
It was a meeting of GWC members to consider the response to the Royal Commission, and the chairman, Mr. Ord, was not present.
The chair was not present.
No.
Why was Mr. Ord not present?
Well, he in the circumstance he thought he should step aside and not be influencing the commission members per se.
Okay, so who is the source then of the information that is set out in this document? Who provided the information for this document to be drafted?
So the information would have been complied from the legal people that were supporting us members of the commission to help bring it together for us.
Were you involved in the provision of information that led to this?
I was involved in reviewing it and editing it.
And is it your evidence you read it at the time it was prepared?
Yes, I did.
And at the meeting that you've just described?
It was. It wasn't a meeting in person. We're doing it by Zoom and things like that,
Okay.
but we had access to it. Yes.
Yes. So you had a meeting by Zoom.
Yeah.
And were you satisfied that the contents of this document is accurate?
From what I was happy with the content. Yes, I think it was well drafted.
Okay. And was it approved by some formal resolution, or was it approved in some other way?
There was some minutes, some record of the meeting, and basically with I can't record now what it said a resolution on, but the minutes were prepared, recorded the fact that we supported it.
Okay. Now, was there anyone else? Were any members in the meeting who dissented from the contents?
Not
of the
that I'm aware of. No, I'm not aware of.
All right.
This was a document actually submitted on the 22nd of April. Is that the one? Was that date?
Yes, it was. It was. Commissioners, I'm about to move to a different topic. I wonder if it might be a convenient time.
But before we break, could I ask that the Casino Control Act, Section 29, capital A, be brought up? Mr. Sergeant, I'm sorry to do this to you, but I want to send you some homework. I hope it doesn't give you indigestion. 29 capital A. Now, you mentioned, as part of the regulatory oversight functions, in answer to questions of Mr. Futrell, the question of looking at contracts for provision of services.
Yes.
And I presume that this is the provision of the Act which gives that power.
Yes.
And you'll see in both 29 capital A, little a and little b, reference to prescribed subject matter and prescribed monetary limits. What I would like you to think about over lunch is whether or not there were at any time in your period, bear in mind that this came into the Act in the late 1990s, during your time, after this came into operation, whether there were any prescriptions of subject matter or monetary limits, and if so, what part did the Gaming and Wagering Commission, as opposed to the department, play in the formulation of those prescriptions?
I think I can answer it for you now.
Fine, thank you.
And the main control was monetary level, and there was a prescribed level, and the Gaming and Wagering Commission was consulted on anything to do with setting the levels, and I think it was varied once. And if I remember correctly, there's only one contract now that's prescribed. It's for a firm that provides IT services to Crown. That's my recollection now.
But so where would from where would the initiation of that process of prescription and approval come?
The department.
From the department.
Yeah.
But is it your evidence that the Gaming and Wagering Commission was involved in the process by which the prescribed limits or subject matter were formulated and the consideration of individual contracts?
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
Thank you. All right, 2 p.m.